My name's Alwyn Ford, and my first connection with the museum was just before it started in 1984. Basically, the founder of the museum, in my view, is Joan Kirner, a former Premier of Victoria. I approached her about a site down by the Maribyrnong, which is now Macas Park, which was then a derelict industrial site, and I was really lobbying for it to be saved from rezoning and sale. I didn't know anything about eco-museums when I met Joan Kirner or started talking about this site. I through Joan, was able to meet museologists and people who knew about eco-museums in Europe and other parts of the world. In the 80s, the western suburbs were going through a period of, what shall we say, downsizing industry, which was fairly traumatic for many people in the region, because it had been a major industrial part of the metropolis. It also had a very multicultural population, which was a great asset in one sense, but also made it harder because people didn't have language skills, and many of them were working in factories or trying to deal with the unemployment if they had lost their jobs in factories. So it's an early government of John Cain that decided it would be a good idea to develop a project that was very positive and affirmed the value of the Western region, and to do it through a museum that was focusing on people rather than on objects, which is traditionally the focus of a museum, to look after a collection of objects. We also had a media team who included a photographer and a video operator, and one of those, the photographer, is still linked with the museum, Peter Haffenden. So he's had as long a connection with the museum as I have, really.
I'm Peter Haffenden. I actually came to the museum in 1984. The museum was started in the 1980s, which is a different kind of a world really, and the idea was to look at industry in this area. The museum's called an eco-museum, which is a museum about a place. It's not like Egyptian things and old things in the world. It's about the place that it's in, which was the western suburbs of Melbourne, and it's now, well, same place, but it's the city of Maribyrnong. Back then, or historically for the previous 100 years, this area was the most industrialised part of Australia, okay? And that meant it had a special kind of history. It was dirty and smelly, and the people who lived here, weren't that rich. They were working in factories, so which wasn't terribly glamorous. But in the 1980s, the world started to look at that sort of thing. Also, because of the factories, this was an area that had more migrants in it than most parts of Australia, so that had a special quality and character itself. Also, there was a greater awareness of the role of women in history. I hope you're all aware of it now, but back in the 1980s, it was still being talked about, and so this museum took a special interest in that. So looked at all that, and did a lot of projects about those things, and accumulated lots of information and records that hadn't been recorded before. And so we have tape recordings with interviews with people in the meatworks and the munitions industries, and then there's videos of special events. Well, actually one of them was the Vietnamese big event in the park, and they were all new. The Vietnamese were quite new at the time, so it kept a record of new arrivals and how they adapted to a new world and that sort of thing. And then it went on, and later on it looked at Aboriginal culture in the western suburbs. Also, we looked at the environment, because the environment in this area is quite different to the environment in lots of other places. So the museum kept going in all these different directions, but it was all about the history, heritage and nature of the local area.
My name's Kerry Polinis, and I'm an artist who started being involved in the Living Museum in 1993. And since that time, really, I've been doing an artisan residency here. I've become an associate of the organisation. My favourite part of the museum is probably the way people interact with the archive, and seeing that happen. So watching people kind of explore the idea of history and suddenly it relating to them and them finding things within the archive that are relevant to their lives and their stories of why they're here and their understanding of Australia. The museum's unique within Australia in that it's based on a new kind of museology which started really in the late 1960s, where certain people that worked at ICOM, the International Council of Museums, were interested in the concept of museums having agency and helping communities and having more direct involvement with people. The museum itself came out of the idea of an integrated museum that connects people, place, the environment, history and art, and that there is a place for everyone in this museum. A fellow called Sven Lindquist, who wrote a book called Dig Where You Stand, How to Do Research on a Job, wrote an instruction manual for people to be able to tell their own stories about where they work and what they do. And this came out of him exploring the history of his grandfather, who worked in cement factories in Sweden, and he found that the stories his grandfather told him weren't the same as what was in the history books.
If there is no future for the museum in terms of being funded, we need to get what was done during its time digitised and put on a record so it is actually could be available.
All kinds of things have started here, union movements, the Aboriginal Advancement League. These are things that have all come out of this place. And all of these stories are in the museum's archive.
It makes people more alive to know more about their environment, to be able to ask questions and to find answers.